Good morning, everyone. I can see we have a huge audience, everyone interested in the ONDP, the Offshore Network Development Plan. And we are very proud today to present it to you, as this is a very interesting product. So yesterday we had the launch event and everyone was thrilled that the ONDP is now finally public, and there's big interest in it. So it's interesting for the industry because then they would know what needs to be produced. This is interesting for all the other players. It's interesting for the governments because they would they would know what needs to be bought by and paid by their countries. So it's the first of its kind product for ENTSO-E. It's part of the TUNDP. And now we will guide you through our product. Maybe next slide. To show, and one more, to show the program. So yeah, this was the welcome. You get soon some instructions to close your microphone and the usual things. Then we will guide you through the ONDP, first by Patricia showing the link to the TUNDP. Then we will guide you through a bit through the methodology and main findings. Then our guest author from RGI will present the messages, and afterwards we will show you the results for each sea basin presented by each of the sea basin conveners. I think this should be it. Maybe now, Francesco, over to you to show some organizational things.
Yeah, thank you very much, Antje, and again, welcome everyone. So in terms of housekeeping, all participants are muted and cameras are off by default. In order to submit questions, you can use Slido, either with this QR code or using the join us Slido with the code that you see here on the screen. We'll also put it on the chat so that it will be easily retrieved. And so, yeah, we will have the Q&A. So register your question, and right after the presentation, we will get a chance to look at all of them, time permitting, and discuss all together and give any clarification you need.
This is what you can download since yesterday, 2 o'clock. So we have for you, we have the Pan-European report, giving a high-level overview also about what is in the regional reports, what are the topics, what are the difficulties, the challenges, the benefits. And then we have 5 sea basin reports. We have 1 report about the methodology, and we have a report about the stakeholder involvement. So also telling you what is the ONDP and what is the purpose. The purpose is to translate the member states' input related to offshore res into a shopping list, into what do we have to buy, what do we have to install, what do we have to pay for, how much does the infrastructure cost? So that's the purpose, and that's interesting input for a lot of discussion, which we will have all around in Europe between the different actors, which have a link, who have a link to the offshore development. Over to you, Patricia. So what's the link to the TUNDP? Could you explain us?
Sure. Thank you, Anja. So good morning, everyone. My name is Patricia Laura, and I'm the convener of the TUNDP at ENTSO-E. I have the pleasure to join today in this event to present you this work, this link to the TUNDP. The ONDP is the first time that ENTSO-E produces it, and as every type of a study has implied a lot of work for a big amount of people around the whole Europe. Let's see this link, yeah, to the TUNDP. Yeah, according to the last TNE regulation, the ONDP, the Offshore Network Development Plans, are part of the TUNDP, as Angie mentioned, the 10 years Network Development Plan, although it is a separate product. For this first time, the regulation requests to publish the offshore network development plans in January 2024, while the TUNDP 2024 will be published in autumn. So also the offshore network development plans have to be developed in coherence with the TUNDP. The alignment was done wherever possible for this first time. And in the next edition, in the TUNDP 2026, the offshore network development plans will be further integrated. Let's see an overview of the whole 10 years network development plan process. Here we have the different steps. Every plan, every TUNDP starts with the scenarios definition. They are a set of possible futures which are used to assess future needs and to assess infrastructure projects. The 2024 scenarios are in progress since beginning 2023 in the new context of the framework guidelines set by ACER, by the European regulator, after the updated Trans-European networks, the 10 regulation that was approved last year. These scenarios will be finalized in the first quarter of 2024. So for this time, as you can understand, the ONDP, the offshore network development plans are based in the previous 2022 scenarios. After the scenarios, we identify if the grid ensured for a certain time horizon, usually named as the starting grid, is adequate. That is it enough to fulfill the European objectives? If not, the weak points of the system are identified and all the resources are included in the system needs report that is also part of the TUNDP package. It's one of its main bricks, in fact. The identification of system need that started this year with the ONDP, the ONDPs that we see today, provides a high-level outlook of the development of offshore systems, and that identification of system needs will go on with the identification of system needs exercise and will end next summer. The third step is the collection of infrastructure projects that could solve those needs. Yeah, we ask project promoters to propose transmission and storage projects based on the previous needs exercise. Probably you are aware that we had the call for projects to the TUNDP 2024 between September and mid-October. And for that call, the inspiration for project promoters was the EOSN report published in 2022. So therefore, both the 2024 edition of the offshore network development plans and the identification of system needs will be the input for the 2026 call for projects. Yeah, the applicant projects that are compliant. Let's go back still because I want to go into the next steps. We are still in the collection. Yeah, the applicant projects that are compliant with the ENTSO-E guidelines for project inclusion with the technical and administrative criteria set in those guidelines that are public are included in the TUNDP project portfolio and therefore assessed following our cost and benefit assessment. The final list of projects for this 2024 process will be published very soon and the CBA will start. These are the 4 steps of the TUNDP responsibility of ENTSO-E, which fit into the PCI and the project of common interest and PMI, the project of mutual interest process that is led by the European Commission. As the system need exercise and the individual CBA assessment are used in this official process, well, it's relevant, and getting these labels, the PCI, the PMI, as you probably know, allows to obtain a set of advantages related to political support, to faster permitting, financing, and sometimes grants also for studies. Yeah. So now we can go to the next slide and we can see with more detail how the offshore network development plans integrate. Yeah, in the TUNDP. Well, the ONDP that we see today identifies preliminary offshore corridors And well, in the EOSN, based on 2022 scenarios, yeah, here the system needs exercise, which is based on the new 2024 scenarios, which are in the open, as I mentioned, uses the offshore ONDP corridors as an input, as conceptual investment candidates, and therefore the identification of system needs will be able to identify the best combination of offshore and onshore capacity increases, and the findings of these two steps exercise will be the relevant input to project promoters to identify the projects that could apply to the 2026 TONDP. If project promoters identify projects that solve those needs and would like to introduce them in the TONDP project portfolio, please take a look to the guidelines for inclusion published in the ENTSO-E website and start as soon as possible to be prepared to present potential projects, yeah, for the next process. So, well, now that we have clear context of these links and what represents the ONDP, remind that it's not a list of offshore projects, but potential corridors, in addition to those additional information that also provides. I give the floor back to Angie and Francesco to present the methodology and the main findings of the study. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. This was interesting. And if anyone has questions, remember the Slido. So now we come to the core part of the ONDP. And just a reminder, what is the ONDP? The ONDP is the translation from the member state RES targets into equipment needs. So what do we have to buy, install, and pay for? What does it cost? So it's not a binding plan. It's not a project plan. And it's just to inform the European governments, European industry, the TSOs, and everyone what will happen and how might it look like. So is everything connected radial to the shore? Does it look like a fisher net, every node connected to each other? You will know in half an hour. Over to you, Francesco. Please explain the methodology.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So what you see here is a schematic visualization of how we investigated the system starting from the generation targets delivered by the member states. The overall aim was to identify hybrid corridors that could optimally integrate the energy produced by the generation clusters and considered in the model. This basically happened in four main steps. We started from the creation of the starting grid based on the TONDP 2022 distributed energy scenario model, integrated with the member state updated generation targets and the let's say updated hybrid starting infrastructure. So looking at the project portfolio that we have currently today, integrating those transfer capacity in the starting case. The second step is have been the identification of expansion candidates, meaning the links that could be potentially interesting to investigate in order to expand the hybrid transmission capacity. The criteria to identify the expansion candidates, we basically apply mainly two criteria. One, geographical proximity between the nodes, and two, direct interest between two particular generation clusters that might be interesting to investigate. The third step had been the expansion of the system following a linear optimization in order to minimize the total cost of the system, so CAPEX and OPEX. Linear optimization means that we have not fixed a value of transmission capacity for the candidates, but we actually explored the total amount up to a certain continuous value in terms of gigawatt. The fourth step has been the post-processing of the found links, because I mean, if we found, of course, in step number 3, a continuous value that don't necessarily refer to our, let's say, a technical standard value for transmission capacity. So our experts in the regional group assessed the results, run a plausibility check, and adjusted the size in order to make sure that the corridors refer to discrete, technically feasible values for realizing these transmission capacities. Up to the next slide. Back to you, Antje.
Thank you. So we mentioned these offshore hybrid projects. Just a reminder what this is and what it is not. So the offshore hybrid projects, they refer specifically to, could you go back to the, yes, they refer specifically to transmission infrastructure. This does not include generation. So this means that we consider everything between, in blue, you can see on the figure in blue, between the offshore infrastructure hubs and to the onshore system. We have also to mention that in this edition, we have not yet looked at the onshore part of the story. This will follow over summer when we go to the TYNDP, the identification of onshore needs. So we look only at offshore in this study that we publish here. So we sometimes call these offshore hybrid projects, sometimes we also call them dual purpose projects because they have two functions. On the one hand, connecting offshore res to the shore, and on the other hand, connecting internationally offshore links with each other or between market nodes. So multi-purpose is used when we additionally cross energy sectors, for example, to hydrogen. Next.
So what's one of the main findings of the ONDP? Well, might sound obvious, but there is a need for speed because the objectives put down by the member states and the Commission are ambitious. So there is a lot of work to do ahead of us. Need for speed for both generation and transmission, since of course the two go hand in hand. We have an average need for speed for 9 times in comparison to the average speed in the last 10 years. Today's offshore res, it's only about 6% of the total capacity foreseen for 2050. So the annual installation of offshore res and the transmission infrastructure connecting it to the shore need to accelerate significantly. The ONDP lays the base to enable all those the investment decisions that will be left, of course, to the developers, but at least now the plans produced by ENTSO-E can set up the framework and clearly define the needs in terms of transmission capacity, equipment, and the overall costs of this kind of assets.
Did you just say we need to have to install 22 gigawatt each year?
Yeah, something like that.
This would be 9 times as fast as we have been in the last decade. That's really huge.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
Okay, so then let's look at what we have to do with this 9 times faster speed. So what you can see on this slide is the results and how things are connected. So on top of the bar charts, you see the capacity of what is connected, and the obvious information is most of the installations will be radially. So most offshore res is connected radially. This is the big dark green part. On top of that, you see 2 other colors, and these are the projects that are connected via offshore hybrid corridors, so via dual purpose links. And these can vary. So we have to also explain to you that we have investigated different technical configuration, meaning either we have DC links, offshore DC breakers, or we don't have DC breakers. And they are important in order to isolate faults. If there is any fault, we need to isolate that fault in order to not be forced to close the entire offshore network down and not to be able to transport anything to the shore. So therefore, DC breakers are important. And on the other hand, the three cost sets, we have to mention that we investigated three variants. And what you see in these slides today is the low cost scenario. We used the cost from before the Ukraine war. It's really optimistic because in real life we see cost really increasing. Some assets have doubled the prices. So this is the optimistic view. So also, therefore, the value chain is crucial that they can deliver the infrastructure in time. And we see also in real life that TSOs are competing to get a place in the queue at the infrastructure shops, so to say. Yes. I think it should also, the third point, sure. We need, when we build these massive investments, when we build the massive infrastructure and the offshores, we should from the start consider what is good for environment and what is not. And therefore we have invited RGI to help us with knowledge on how we can avoid to destroy biodiversity and nature. And so doing this, we wanted to break silos and to speed up with information, because it's obvious that we from the start should consider whatever is necessary to save the environment. And we'll hear more about this later. Next.
So one of the other main findings of the expansion study related to the ONDP is that up to 1 out of 7 gig of the transmission capacity of the offshore transmission capacity will be connected through offshore hybrid corridors. So the future European offshore system will be a combination of radial connection, classical point-to-point interconnectors, and the hybrid projects combining both functions and multipurpose solutions. Hybrid corridors will, of course, not develop from the one day to the other. You will be able to see in our plans the step-by-step evolution of this kind of systems from one decade to the other, arriving to link up to the 14% of offshore res in 2050 through this connection solution. You can see here on the slide a map that you will be also able to consult online of the existing and planned radial links considered as a starting point, the corridors identified in the study, and the potential corridors and the potential corridors.
Now a bit about two sides of one coin. So here we see the benefits of having more international interconnections across the waters. So that's the usual benefits that you already know from the TYNDPs. So the energy security would increase, because if there's anywhere any fault in the system, then the energies could still be transported via a different path, because there's a bit more redundancy in the system. We would have price convergence, that the usual effect when you connect markets, then the prices on both sides equalize a bit. And we would also be able to better use the offshores, as the hybrid corridors provide these extra paths, and reduce also the green energy surplus, which could be there otherwise and would have to be cut off. So doing this, we would help to avoid up to 5 to 8 million ton CO2 each year. To set this in context, the TYNDP 22 found that the 88 gigawatts across border connections would save 31 million ton CO2 each year. Next. So the headaches we have when wanting to build this is the system risk. So if we are not able to isolate faults and to minimize the impact of losing something, which always happens, by the way, in the system, but you just cannot notice because it's so fast, and protection system help to save the system. So if we would lose too much energy, then we would set the system at risk. As you might remember, the 3,000 megawatt in the for the continental system, or 1,400 megawatt for the Nordic system, and we discuss here 2 gigawatt lines, so 2,000 gigawatts. So if one line to the system would be off or anything happens, we would have a problem. Operation. So far, we do have some HVDC connections here and there in the European systems, but this is all one single systems. They are not interconnected with each other. So we have to learn how to operate a network of DC connections. And there are some projects already ongoing, and we are already starting to learn how to do that. And also to mention, if we are too late with the infrastructure, of course, all the offshore RES development is at risk at the same time. So we have definitely to closely collaborate with the colleagues from the wind industry and the wind developers and the government, so that we do the right things together at the right point in time. General challenges is, as I mentioned already, the infrastructure supply chain is strained. The ports availability is also a topic which needs to be discussed by the governments. So we might have not enough space in the ports in the right moment to get things assembled and to be shipped out to the places where it's needed. Environmental impact, I said it already, we need to secure biodiversity in the environment and the flexibility of the system in general, because now big production is moved to somewhere else in the system compared to where it is now. So this will also need different tackling of flexibility topic.
So we mentioned already that the technological development and the technical equipment considered will impact the configuration of offshore transmission. In particular, the sea breakers will be a major technological breakthrough in the development of hybrid assets. The availability of commercially, let's say, attractive DC breakers in the future will allow a cost reduction, optimization of the assets, and will allow the increase in number of hybrid corridors realized. With a total cost increase of only 3%, these breakers will allow to address the equivalent of 50% of the interconnection needs identified in the ONDP 2022 IOSN. You can see here on the slide a little bit a comparison of what happens without DC breakers, meaning that we need to consider basically one converter per new link, or with DC breakers. So realizing DC hubs connecting the different generation clusters to the shore. So without breakers, we have found 13 additional hybrid corridors, realizing 14 gigawatt of additional transmission capacity at a cost of around 32 billion euros. But what happens if we have DC breakers? You can see here the significant difference. From 13 additional hybrid corridors, we can go to 34. From 14 gigawatt of additional corridors, we can arrive at 44. From 32, but with an increase in the cost of around 10 billion euros. So this will allow this, let's say, additional investment will, however, really allow the realization of a significant number of hybrid corridors from today to 2050.
Yeah, and finally here, the shopping list. So you see how many offshore converter stations and onshore converter stations we would need to install. So this is always the upper end of the range that we found with the different variants that we investigated. And how many DC breakers, so either we have them or not. So, and if we have them early, then it would be up to 35 units. And then you see the route length for cable, which is between 49 and 54,000 kilometers. But watch out, it's route length. It's not kilometer cable length, because when we have DC systems, we have two poles, a positive and a negative pole. Each pole needs a cable, so then you can multiply this amount times 2. If we have a metallic return, then it's additional cable, not the same size, but smaller, will have to be laid. If it's AC, then it's even 3. So it's just the route length. And for the manufacturers, they will know they have to multiply this and they have to produce all this for us. And we are already from the TSO side knocking at their doors and want to buy urgently the things, as we have to be 9 times faster than before. Just saying it again. Next. I thought there was another slide. There was not. Fine. Then we go over to you, Madli, from RGI. So we are very curious to listen to you. What is your recommendations? How can we save the environment?
Thank you, Antje. Yes, can you go to the next slide, please? So we are the Renewables Grid Initiative. We are a coalition of TSOs and NGOs working for the environmentally friendly deployment of grid in Europe. You can see our members in the map on the right. And we started looking at the offshore environment a while ago now, in 2015, with our first study on subsea cables, followed in 2019 by our Marine Grid Declaration. And then in 2020, we launched Ocean, the Offshore Coalition for Energy and Nature, which is a coalition of TSOs, NGOs, and wind industry, working for the environmentally friendly deployment of offshore wind and grid in the North and Baltic Sea. And in addition to that, just last autumn, we launched the Offshore Coalition for Energy and Nature in the Mediterranean Sea Basin. So we now look at most European sea basins with our activities, and it is based on this knowledge that ENTSO-E invited us to draft this environmental chapter. So we thank you again for the opportunity. And on the next slide, I will go through the main points that we cover in our chapter. Because yes, as Antje pointed it out, offshore infrastructure and environmental protection need to go hand in hand. And that's because the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis we are facing are intrinsically linked and need to be addressed jointly. To do that, first, environmental impact need to be avoided as much as possible. To start with, the impacts that are left need to be minimized. And in addition to that, nature needs to be supported because our European seas are in a really poor state, and we really need to do more in order to continue benefiting from the ecosystem services that we depend on. For the avoidance part, the avoidance of negative environmental impact, maritime spatial planning is a key tool to balance the various interests that exists at sea between, for example, the fishing sector, aquaculture, tourism, shipping, etc. This is a really important tool, and that's why the ONDP relied on the MSP established by the various member states. A key success factor in this process is the meaningful involvement of stakeholders, which is something that European member states are getting better at the more they do this exercise, because MSP started in the EU just 10 years ago. A second very important aspect is the ecosystem-based approach to MSP that ensures that nature is taken account in planning. That involves, for example, not building infrastructure in migratory corridors for marine mammals, for example, or ensuring connectivity between ecologically valuable sites to ensure a network of protected areas where nature can recover. The sea basin approach to MSP is also very important to better understand the cumulative impacts of all the activities that we do at sea. which is linked with the data collection, because data is collected to assess the state of marine biodiversity and cumulative impact, but it's important that this data is shareable and shared between the various stakeholders to better understand all of that at the sea basin level. Then looking at the mitigation of the remaining impacts, this is a crucial step, of course, for the siting of offshore wind and grid after avoidance. And some very promising mitigation measures can be applied depending on the impact on the pressure created especially during the construction process. So the first one being habitat disturbance. There, for example, micrositing is important to minimize interference with reefs. The timing is also extremely crucial throughout construction. So, for example, avoiding the seasonal migration of certain valuable fish species. And the cable laying techniques that are used should also consider the type of seabed in order to minimize sediment release and to minimize the impact on biodiversity. Concerning underwater noise, again, the timing is crucial. Activities should be scheduled at times when sites are not being used as breeding sites or nurseries by relevant species. And it's also possible to use less noise-intensive techniques or also acoustic deterrent devices. Concerning the risk of collision with vessels, it's important to adjust speed or slow down vessels, as well as reducing the overall number of maintenance vessel trips. And it's also possible to have a marine mammal observer on board to keep an eye on what's going on and mitigate possible impacts. Concerning electromagnetic fields, the research so far has been inconclusive. More research is needed, but so far burying cables is the most recommended to address this potential impact. And concerning heat emissions, so far research found that heat emissions related to grid infrastructure are negligible. Then moving towards the last step, the enhancement of nature, that is something really important given the current state of our seas. We need to go beyond mitigating impacts and avoiding impacts. We really need to support nature. And there's two ways of doing this. One is nature inclusive design. And there you can see the picture on top. This is a fish hotel on the grid infrastructure of Tennet in the Dutch North Sea that yielded very positive results so far and will be implemented more and more in more and more sites. So that's a great example. And then off-site restoration is also something that can be done. In that case, it's a bottom picture, and that's done by Terna in Italy. It's Posidonia oceanica seagrass recovery. Because the seagrass, the Posidonia seagrass meadows have been very damaged in the previous decades, and it's a very valuable habitat. It's also a carbon sink, and so putting efforts to support it is very important. So we encourage that sort of measures. That is it. I would just conclude by saying that this information is based on the current information that we have, the current data that we have, that of course will continue evolving with time. So our contribution will also, based on this data, evolve with time. And that's it on my side. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of this webinar, and I pass the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Martli. This was really interesting. So I conclude that we always need to help you collecting data, and that we always need to be flexible to adjust our procedures depending on what we find underways. So this was really interesting. Could you go back, please? So now we jump over to the sea basin information. And so here you can see which sea basins we have according to the 10E regulation. And then we go through the sea basins one by one. So this was just to remind you which countries are part of which sea basin. We start with Arno Haverkamp, who is the convener for the Northern Sea Basin.
Hi, welcome. I'm Arno Haverkamp, and together with the regional group Northern Seas, we've looked to the Northern Seas and make the offshore network development plan. If you go to the next slide, the North Sea, and the seas around the North Sea have quite a potential. The water depth is not that deep and quite an area, although also a lot of the seas already also have other functions. However, the member states and also Great Britain and Norway indicated that there is a potential for quite an ambition. So the non-binding targets, together with the ambition of Great Britain and of Norway, count up to 300, more than 300 gigawatts of offshore wind. Not everything will be electrically connected. The ideas are not that far, but some countries do have some plans also to have hydrogen. So we considered this and translated this table on the left to the right, where we pinpointed where which capacity is located. And as you can see from 2023, there's already something, but it will build out towards future and be spread over the North Sea. This is based on the maritime spatial plans of the member states and also aligned with ministries and built on TSO's insights. The ambition is high, and what is shown before, that there's a need to speed up, not only for building out the wind farms themselves, but also building out the infrastructure. And you can clearly see this also in this sea basin, that we have to start from 2.5 gigawatts. We have currently annually up to 16 gigawatts and keep this up to 2040. So there's quite an increase in speed for the build out. If we go to the next slide, this is only input data. On top of this generation input data, we consider a lot of candidates. Candidates from and to countries, but especially via this offshore wind farms, making this hybrid interconnectors. For 2040, we already had 85 candidates, and for 2050, even up to 180 candidates. The results showed that there were clearly seen that we get two corridors, one north-south corridor and one west-east corridor. So from Norway to Denmark, to Norway to Germany, to Netherlands, to Belgium, with the north-south connection, and also from Ireland to England, from England to the mainland. We can see these corridors already arising in 2040 and are robust in both technology scenarios. I will come back to this in the next slide. Up to 2050, up to 2050, 21 candidates were selected to build these corridors, which adds up to 30 gigawatts of capacity, and with the 28,000 kilometers of route length. And as you can see from this, many candidates were only a couple selected, still quite a lot. But what we can clearly see is we want to build a cost-efficient offshore network, and this will not lead to a copper plate. And that's what we see back in the results. The infrastructure is used to evacuate the wind at first and used for interconnection second, not building a copper plate. If we go to the next slide, I will zoom a bit more into the time frame and the scenario differences. On the left side, you can see the infrastructure, how it could form, how it could be optimized towards future for 2040, 2050, where there is the option to implement DC circuit breakers. On the right side, you see 2040 and 2050 again, but now without the DC circuit breakers. And what we can see is that still the same corridors are there, north, south, east, west. However, with less capacity and less links were selected, but with the same kind of cost. So this DC circuit breaker is more or less necessary to build out a more meshed grid. Without this DC circuit breakers, you need more converter station, which make it more expensive, and therefore less can be selected. So you can, if we look to 2040, 2050, we can see that most capacity is already selected in 2040, and then on top of this for 2050, some extra is selected. And as said, the main part with the DC circuit breakers. Yeah, I've been asked to keep it short, so I'll end it up here and hand it over to the next sea basin.
Yeah, Lydia, now it's your turn. So now we swim over to the Baltic Seas, and happy to have you here. So what can we expect in the Baltic Sea?
Yes, thank you. I will give you a closer look into the Baltic Sea. The ONDP of the Baltic Sea was developed by both the regional group Baltic Sea and the Baltic Offshore Grid Initiative. And countries involved are Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Germany, Denmark, and Sweden. So the ambitious objectives for renewable energy set by the European Union are anticipated to be significantly aided by the Baltic Sea area, where several countries are actively exploring offshore wind potential and possible future projects. As you can see here, the already discovered RES potential in the Baltic Sea sums up to more than 70 gigawatt until 2050, with intermediate steps of more than 26 gigawatt and 45 gigawatt in 2030 and 2040. As already explained by Francesco earlier, the ONDP shows that additional offshore infrastructure needs to be developed in the same speed as offshore wind parks. A high installation rate in the Baltic Sea is already expected for the years until 2030, but after that, the ambition remains high. With 377,000 square kilometer, the Baltic Sea provides the size and plenty of room for installation of offshore wind farms that can take advantage of the region's strong and reliable winds. In 2030, there are already first hybrid projects planned in the Baltic Sea. The Kriegers Flak combined grid solution between Denmark and Germany, which is already operating today, and the Elwind project between Estonia and Latvia. In 2040, as well as in the following time steps, as you will shortly see on my next slides, the majority of generation capacity will be radially connected. The ONDPs for all sea basins also looked at maritime spatial planning, and for the TSOs, in order to plan well in advance, it's essential to have certainty about the allocation of areas for offshore wind energy and infrastructure. This task is, of course, for the member states, which requires both extensive national planning and international agreements. However, there should be a close dialogue with the TSOs, and planning projects like the ONDP should be taken into account. Next slide. Oh, sorry, no, that's correct, right? Thank you. The map on the right shows in orange the radial and hybrid links, which have already been planned and are therefore in the starting grid, and in green, the grid extensions identified by the ONDP. You can see a corridor from northeast to southwest has been identified, which is a first step towards a more integrated offshore infrastructure. The map shows the configuration with a DC circuit breaker where 2 out of possible 13 candidates have been selected by the optimizer and in post-processing by the regional group. The candidates represent 3 gigawatt of transmission capacity and approximately 100 kilometer of offshore cable. In the configuration without a DC circuit breaker, which means substantial higher costs, as was explained before, no candidates have been chosen. Here you can see again that the DC circuit breaker makes a huge difference. Next slide, please. Thank you. For 2050, with a DC circuit breaker, 9 out of 85 possible candidates have been selected, with 10.6 gigawatt transmission capacity and approximately 2,800 kilometer of offshore cable. Without the DC breaker, for 2050, only 2 candidates have been selected. Overall, we can see a further reinforcement of the northeast to southwest corridor and a new east to west corridor. And as I wanted to keep it short as well, that's it from the Baltic Sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. Also quite some tasks in your sea basin. So now over to you, Belén. Atlantic offshore, you have quite different climate there and very steep sea bed. So what do you expect?
Good morning, everyone. So I'm Belén Segura, the convener of the Continental Southwest region, but yeah, not the only one of this region. Behind me there is members that without their effort, not possible today to present this report as a reality. So next slide. Within this Atlantic offshore corridor, the capacities, again, as previously said, coming from the non-binding goals from the member states of Spain, France, Ireland, and Portugal. It is expected that by 2030, we will have an offshore installed capacity of around 6 gigawatts. And these capacities will evolve till around 26 gigawatts by 2040 and around 45 gigawatts by 2050. So this will require, again, as a challenging rhythm of installation, as previously said, maybe not as previous corridors, but it is required an annual installation of less than 1 gigawatts till 2030 and less than 2 gigawatts per year to be installed in the next 2 decades. In the right side of the slide, you can see the allocation of this capacity. First, that will be connected by 2030 in a radial mode, and this will be evolved to first hybrid projects in the following decades, 2040 and 2050, mainly in France and Ireland. So next slide. What are the main findings or key messages that we could highlight in these corridors? First of all, that we have identified one hybrid corridor between Ireland and France, located in the north area of France, called Brittany, and the Celtic Sea area in Ireland. This corridor will cover around 500 kilometers and will allow a transfer power of around 700 megawatts. It's important as well to highlight that a few number of candidates has been tested during this ONDP exercise. So that will mean that in the future ONDP exercise, new corridors could emerge within this corridor, within the Atlantic offshore corridor. The offshore infrastructure is highly dependent on the evolution of the fluorating technology because, maybe you know that this sea basin is characterized by deep water sites. So this floating technology represents an alternative for the evolution of the offshore, or the development of the offshore capacity in the Atlantic offshore corridor. And last but not least, we would like to highlight as well the importance of maritime and spatial planning that will allow a more optimal, of course, use of maritime space, reducing conflicts and enhancing coexistence and synergies between the different sectors within this Atlantic offshore grid corridor, and of course, I think in all the corridors. Well, thank you. This is.
Thank you, Belen. Very interesting. So now we swim further to the west. No, actually to the east. Antonio, one of our conveners from the southern regions. So now you can present the southwest offshore grid. So what is happening in the Mediterranean?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm Antonio Conserva, the convener of the Continental Central South Group. So looking to the southwest offshore corridor, as you can see here, this region is mostly highly concentrated by foreseen development of offshore wind, mostly radial, with radial connections we up to 20 gigawatts in the very long term time horizon. Also, a small hybrid option has been tested among countries to assess the profitability of this new generation offshore to connect to the grid. And if we go to the other slide, we can see that this region confirm the analysis performed in this first round of the UNDP confirmed the strong interest in the region from the TSOs also to develop the offshore, but mostly concentrated on the radial solution. This depends on different factors, and especially the fact of the technology, and which also the characteristics of the basin, which are characterized by high depth, and so the radial for the moment has been confirmed in all the scenarios, but without excluding also further developments between countries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Antonio. So then we travel to the Far East, seen from here. Göran, could you show us what will happen in the southeast offshore grid, which is Eastern Mediterranean and Black Sea?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I will continue on the other side of Mediterranean. As you know, our region is characterized by high degree of developed tourism, and seas are quite different from previously mentioned basins in terms of depth, etc. So, very brief update on our region, which includes Mediterranean East Sea and the Black Sea. And following European countries, we have Italy, Croatia, Greece, Romania, and Cyprus with expressed member state goals. And of course, also we have Slovenia and Bulgaria without member state goals. This sea basin includes TSOs with different challenges, different energy mixes, and different sizes in terms of whole ENTSO-E. Also, we can say that these regions have great potential for producing offshore wind energy in the future. So when talking about concrete numbers based on member state inputs, as we can see on this figure, total generation for 2030 is assumed to be around 8.8 gigawatts. For 2040, it is around 17 gigawatts, and for 2050, around 26 gigawatts of offshore. The goals for 2040 and 2050 time horizons are highly ambitious compared to the current number of installed capacity from offshore. Some countries, such as Italy and Greece, will lead the region in achieving these sea basin goals. Next slide, please. On this slide, we highlighted the main features of this sea basin as well as the main challenges. At the moment, only Italy has installed capacity from offshore in this region. The project located in Taranto, Apulia, south of Italy. entered into operation in May 2022 and is composed from 10 turbines with total capacity 30 megawatts. At this early stage, in terms of that, more or less countries are without installed capacity from offshore in this region. All connections are considered as radial, but of course in future editions of ONDPs we will also explore the possibility of hybrid connection as well. So for this region and the whole EU area, the challenging goals for reduction of CO2 emissions until 2030 and even higher targets for 2050 will require huge increase in connection of renewable energy sources. So we see the potential of offshore here. It will play a greater role than before due to the comparative advantages compared to the onshore wind power plants. In 2030, we need, as you can see on these figures on the right side, in 2030 we need approximately 4 or 5 billion euros for building approximately 350 kilometers of new connections for offshore infrastructure. In 2040, we need approximately 10 billion euro for 1,000 kilometers of offshore infrastructure, and in 2050, we need approximately 15 billion euro for total 1,600 kilometers. So at the end here we come to the main challenges to achieve these ambitious goals. So we need to perform depth analysis of spatial specifics in the region. This actually means that the price of building offshore wind power plants in this region varies according to local variables, water depth and distance from the shore. Also, we need to develop national maritime spatial plans, taking into account that plenty of countries from this region don't have established it yet. We need to include offshore member state targets into the national scenarios and targets such as energy strategies, national climate energy plans, etc., and NDPs, etc. And at the end, the internal reinforcements are also a very important factor to take it into account. So at the end, some key conclusions. This region has really great potential, but still a lot of work needs to be done. Thank you for your attention.
That is so true, with a lot of work still to be done. That's valid for all of us. So then let's see what our attendees have. They had a lot of questions, and so now I think we'll move to Slido. Could you move to Slido, and then Leah, maybe you might wish to read up the questions so that everyone hears what we discuss. Leah, are you there?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me all right and that you can see my screen as well. So I am sharing here the questions that we have already received on Slido. Please do not hesitate to add more and to vote for the questions you would like us to address. So let's start with these first questions that I have flagged, which is regarding the methodology. So a good starting point. I will read it out loud. So it's about which market design assumptions, capacity calculation methods, representation of grid constraints, which assumptions basically have been used to produce the results that we have just presented to you. And I think maybe Francesco, you want to take that one.
Thanks, Leah. So the expansion modeling study, let's say the expansion modeling part of the ONDP, have been developed as a market simulation, considering the different nodes as an independent, let's say, market node, right? In the study, in the reports, you will not find, however, let's say, a direct link to the concept of offshore bidding zone, because this has been, this kind of approach has been used in order to perform the market simulation and the expansion study without, though, let's say, taking assumptions on the 2050 market setup. That might depend on several amount of factors. So in general, yeah, the different generation units have been considered, let's say, with their own, let's say, prices in the study. But again, the market setup and the market rules that will be enforced in 25 years' time will not include. I mean, this the market topic has not been faced in the reports themselves. Of course, changing the market setup in a model affect the results, but as of today, we have used let's say most commonly used type of expansion modeling that is normally developed for this kind of studies. So we have used something that is let's say of average knowledge in case of similar exercises. In terms of the, as I said, in terms of the methodology, the algorithm used for expansion, as mentioned when explaining the 4 steps, a linear expansion between these nodes have been considered, so allowing the algorithm to expand from 0 up to whatever economically viable to meet the target function have been considered, so not limiting in anyhow, let's say, by default, the amount of transmission capacity needed.
Thank you, Francesco. Unless anyone would like to complete the answer, I hope, Victor, that we have answered all your questions. I will move to the favorite questions of the audience from Mary. So indeed, 9 times faster than we can achieve today is unfortunately not credible. I think it's more common than a question. So we need the EU to do an impact assessment of supply chains readiness for the period 2035-2040 and an action plan to address the shortfall. And here, Francesco, anything you would like to add to this statement?
I could do that. So actually, there is a group working for more than a year already, led by the Commission, looking at the industry. So this is known that this is challenged. Commission works on it. Something with a tone. Then they also recently published an infrastructure action plan and a offshore wind action plan. And also here are measures and actions proposed that would help speeding up the situation. Yesterday at the event of launching the event of the ONDP, there were many CEOs from the TSO. It was also industry was represented, RGI was represented. So everyone is really committed to get this done. But I agree completely with you. 9 times faster is interesting. So try to do something only 2 times faster. This is also interesting. We will have to see what we are able to do. Everyone is committed, and we do what we can. So let's see where this ends. Thank you.
Thank you, Antje. Next question, and we are back on the methodology. So will the optimization model for selecting the hybrid corridors and the linear model be published? And do you see nodal simulations to be used in future ONDPs? I think maybe that's more for whichever of you wants to take it. Francesco, maybe?
Yeah, so the model about the data publishing in the following weeks, we will share, we'll make available online in the online platforms the generation inputs that we consider and a list of other data that we have produced in order to be downloadable. But in the methodology, you will find the characteristics. There is a dedicated methodological report that explains step by step how we consider the different candidates, the cost set that we have considered, how we use MSP to define location of generation units, etc. In terms of future ONDPs, let's say that the floor is open for any kind of improvements for the future editions, as this was just the first one, and we had to, let's say, make it sure it worked with the ongoing T1DP process. For the future ones, the general aim, the general target is to completely integrate the ONDP modeling into the T1DP modeling, so that we don't need any more to run different models, but make sure that the different T1DP packages and reports are extracted starting from an integrated analytic modeling exercise.
Francesco, I hope that answers the question. Another question from Marie. What assumptions on cable technology have we made? Has allowance been made for technology evolution and innovation over the next 25 years?
So, yes, we can answer in that way. For the study, we used the assumption that we work with 2 gigawatt units or 2 gigawatts size of cable links and also converter stations to make it simple. But of course, sometimes still smaller links will be needed, as simply the system behind it is small, receiving this energy. But we assumed 2 gigawatt cable size and 15 megawatt, I think it was, size for offshore wind farms, and using this was then put into the model. The turbines. 25, no, 15. Look this up. This is all published in the methodology report. There you find also all the assumptions we made. So that's in the methodology report, actually.
And concerning cable technology, for the basins where floating has been deemed as probably the relevant type of installation, we have included the variance in terms of, let's say, costs that might impact this kind of installations. In terms of modeling, though, we have assumed a single approach in terms of mechanical characteristics of the cables. And in terms of KV, I'm going by memory now, is 525 for the HVDC connections, and of course the classic 400 kV for the AC connections.
Thanks to you both. Next question regarding projects of common interest that connect to non-EU member states. I suppose this question is regarding input data, though it's not so clear to me.
We don't talk about projects of common interest here. We just investigate what would be needed to make, which infrastructure would be needed to connect the offshore as delivered by the member states. Project of common interest is then later in the steps after the T1DP. Promoters can apply for the status and then receive it or not, and then have some advantages of that. So just to give a bit context. But we have, of course, non-member states considered in the study, so which is Norway and Great Britain. We received 16 gigawatt connection possibilities from our colleagues from National Grid, and which have been used in the model to connect to other member states or not. Most are connected because UK is a good point to connect to, so there will be flows, and discussing then the cost and who pays what is then part of the next steps, where a methodology needs to be found, and the Commission will come with some guidelines this summer. And how then member states or non-member states will be treated is still not ready discussed. But of course, then European Commission will focus on European countries, and we will see what has to be considered in that model and what is not. But maybe Arno, you want to add anything? It's your region.
Oh, I think you said it quite well.
Thanks, Antje and Arno. Moving to the next one, which is about energy surplus. Christian asked whether there will be enough infrastructure to evacuate all the electricity produced to the consumption sites.
So about the curtailment topic, in general, curtailment should be evaluated at, let's say, energy system level. This is why we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation how we plan to link the ONDP into the IOSN. Normally in the IOSN, you find the assessment of the overall curtailment because, of course, it does not only depend on the onshore system, it does not only depend on the offshore system. We all know already from today that you can install exactly or over-install whatever you want in terms of offshore system. But then, of course, if there is not enough onshore capacity to make sure that the offshore rest penetrates into the continental system, reaching the consumption centers, this is all for nothing. So in general, the overall curtailment will be assessed in the IOSN so that we are able to optimize both systems at once, because it would have not been, let's say, useful to check it now without optimizing the onshore system or doing the other way around. So, of course, the T1DP, as always, because again, you will find already information about curtailment in the previous edition of the T1DP. We will assess this in the upcoming 2024 edition of the identification of system needs.
Thank you, Francesco. Next question, I think, was actually already answered on a different form. So I will pass this question now because Marie had the same just a few minutes earlier. And we'll move to the next question on the use of DC breakers, which is a technology that has been available for more than a decade. So like, how can we incentivize its use? I don't think that's the core topic of ONDP, but maybe you have a view.
I mean, we mentioned this in the reports. I mean, the words we use is commercially attractive because we all know very well that this is circuit breaker technology is not, let's say, something that needs to come. The industry knows how to realize this kind of component. But of course, I mean, Mount, you're right. This need to be incentivized. The thing is that the ONDP show the potential that we can extract from the from large use of this kind of technology. So it clearly, you have seen it in the previous slides. Without DC breakers, let's say the diffuse realization of hybrid corridors is not really possible. We need to go for DC hubs. So we need DC breakers, we need standardization, we need an interoperable system. This kind, the ONDP tried to offer as the first step, showing really that this is the way to go if we want to achieve an optimal integration of the generation targets.
And this commercial attractive, maybe I add a bit. It's for the it is on the market, but it's the risk for a TSO to buy something that has not been tested in practice. So there's a bit reluctance to be the first to install this and to buy this. So that's a bit the problem.
I think the next question goes to Arno, actually, because you mentioned the East-West corridor that links Ireland to the UK.
Yep.
So how will ENTSO-E and EU policy be aligned to encourage interconnection with the UK, given it is more efficient than connecting to Ireland?
Well, from electrical point of view, it is more efficient to connect offshore wind farms to each other at sea. So what we see from Ireland to France an interconnector arising. You don't see it in the ONDP of the North Sea, but of the Atlantic. So there is a direct connection from Ireland to continental Europe. However, we also see that it's beneficial to link UK with continental Europe via this offshore hubs. And then we see a flow from Ireland to UK and from UK to continental Europe. So is it policies might not be aligned that far yet. However, it's not difficult. Yeah, well, it's not impossible to build interconnectors to the UK. So this plan does not focus on the political hurdles, but on what's the most efficient for an offshore grid. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Arno. So I see it's 20 past 11 already. We aimed at finishing this webinar at around 1/2 past. So I will take a few more questions. I've seen already some questions asking if we would publish the slides, and of course we will. They will be published online on the events page today or at the latest tomorrow. So yes, you will access the slides, and the recording will also be published. So now taking at least one more question, this one on hydrogen. So maybe Francesco or Antti, if you could explain how H2 has been considered in the study.
Yes, I can do that. So according to 10E, we have the task also to look at hydrogen infrastructure. This time it's the first edition, so there are gaps. So we did not look yet at the onshore system. It comes in summer, and we have only looked a very bit on hydrogen for the 2050 time horizon, considering 3 countries which do have plans in this respect. So we kind of installed in the model electrolyzers in some of the offshore nodes, meaning that this eats the energy produced already offshore, so that less electricity, that the expansion model would go for less electricity lines as the energy is already used. I don't know if I get the question right, but you can look forward to the edition when we do have merged completely the ONDP with the TYNDP, because formally it's one product, and from TYNDP 26 onwards, all will be in one process. And as you know, and as Patricia explained in the beginning, the process starts with scenarios, and there we work already for several editions together with ENTSO-E, looking at joint scenarios for the gas and electricity system. And now a new entity will be, association has to be formed, the ENO, according to the gas package from the Commission. So then ENO is responsible for the hydrogen infrastructure, and then I'm sure we will collaborate with ENO as well when doing our TYNDPs. But we aim for getting better information on hydrogen. What are the prices for the assets? That was the difficulty this time. And so then we will do from the scenario start already joint scenarios that we have a better feeling for the hydrogen part. And also we envisage to simply ask the member states for their plans, so that we don't have to guess so much, but that we have information that we can use as we do use the input from the member states related to offshore res generation.
Thank you, and Victor, I hope that answers your question. Let's take one more, and then I will ask Antti to conclude. So I think, Antti, it was you mentioned that TSOs were lining up at the shop for infrastructure equipment. Given the need for rapid build-out, are projects developed by private capital going to be treated on equal footing with TSO projects? Maybe Antti, you want to answer, or I can also start an answer based on at least how projects are treated in the TONDP. So in the TONDP, as you may know, we consider all transmission projects and storage projects by both TSOs and private developers, and we have put guidelines in place to make sure that there is equal treatment between all promoters, whether they are TSOs or not. And as you know, that's also the case in the PCI and PMI processes that are managed by the European Commission. But maybe, Antti, you have a view on the specific case of offshore infrastructure.
No, I don't. I think it's exactly the same and exactly as you explained. We only provide from ENTSO-E the information what is needed, but who builds what, and if it is a TSO or if it is a non-TSO project promoter, that's a completely different story. It should provide information for everyone. We don't. We must not discriminate anyone, and we try as good as we can to follow that.
Thank you, Antje. So unfortunately, there are some other questions that we cannot address right now, but we will look at all questions and write some written answers. So maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but yeah, very shortly we can publish all questions in this webinar, our answers, and of course you'll have the slides and recording as well. I will go back to the slides now. So, Emile, if you could please share your screen again for the conclusion by Antje.
Yes. So, yeah, what remains to be said next? It remains to be said. Thank you all for attending this webinar. We still have more than 360 attendees, so it seems to be interesting. I always like most the questions because then we have interaction, and I'm always so curious what people are interested in. So thanks a lot for your questions also. What happens next is an online survey starting next week. So then you can ask more questions. You can give your opinion on the ONDP. You can recommend improvements. We know that we have shortcomings, but we had only half of the time that a TYNDP has. So actually there we are quite proud that we were able to deliver. We aim for a physical workshop on the 1st of March here in Brussels. And then we will dive deeper into the topics together with you, and also preparing the next edition and have discussions on certain topics. So mark your calendar with this date, and then we look forward for a day with a workshop with you. In ENTSO-E now we integrate the ONDP into the TYNDP 24, as Patricia explained in the very beginning, so that we do have information next summer on both the offshore part and the implications on the onshore network. So this is the missing part right now, but in October you will know how this will look like. So the TYNDP 24 release is planned for autumn this year, and then we will have the complete picture on the offshore and the onshore part. Next slide. So then we thank you all for attending. We thank all the Secretariat members supporting this process. We have a fantastic interactive tool, so you should stay on the slide, on the side, and play with the tool and explore the results we have. And we have we thank the 5 regions working with us, providing the reports for the regions and following the joint approach we had for the entire system. So it was a big task. We solved it and made it together. And thank you all and have a nice day.
Thank you, Antje. So we'll close this webinar now. There were some contact email addresses on the previous slides, because I saw some questions asking for contact details. So now you have them. And yes, thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day.